Welcome back to the Ignite podcast. Today, we're delighted to have Jared Ficklin on the program. He's been in design for decades, currently a principal designer at Argo Design. Jared, would love to get an intro from you for the audience.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, no, my name is Jared Ficklin, and I am a founding partner and chief creative technologist at Argo Design. Before that, I worked at another product design shop called Frog Design. So I'm about 25 years in the product design industry. My primary passion has been the interface between humans and computers. And my career has put me in a place where I've worked on a lot of unconventional interfaces, from voice and gesture computing all the way up to wearable mobile computer or the magic goggles you put on your face to see trippy stuff, and a lot of other things. So it's been a really good
Amazing.
ride.
What a cool background. How did you originally get into design?
Well, design found me. I was into computers and I was into rock and roll. My dad bought me an Atari 800 and a subscription to Basic Magazine. And from then on, I was always around computers. Rock and roll meant you had to create t-shirt designs. You had to create flyers, and eventually you bought mathrock.com and started putting stuff on the internet at the early years, right? So the two came together to a point when I finished college after studying everything from philosophy to marketing. I just hired on a web shop. And then one of the guys I worked with at this web shop had moved to Austin, where we had played a couple times in the band, and said, hey, you know what they're paying VB script developers out here? This was 1999, by the way, height of the dot-com boom. And I was like, hey, I'm moving to Austin. I ended up getting a job as a design technologist at a company I didn't know much about, which was Frog Design. And of course, they are world famous product design.
Yeah, they're world famous. Yeah, were they at the time when you joined, or were they on the?
Absolutely, they were.
Yeah.
All my friends were like, "You're going to get a job at Frog. That is so cool." And I'm like, "Oh, I should learn something about them." So I stayed there for 14 years, and my education in product design came from, putting together a technology side of design. And we created the title Design Technologist, which meant more and more I was using technology to answer the design questions as opposed to deploying the design. And that practice grew at Frog, and eventually that got me the position of Frog Fellow, which is kind of a lifetime title for creating that new practice and having an impact on the design trade. Around 10 years ago, Mark Ralston, Kevin McDonald, and Mark Gauger and myself decided to leave Frog and create our own product design firm so we could factor the goals and the business and kind of be more nimble, so we could participate more in the early design story with startups and such. And that has led to Argo Design, where we now have 4 offices, one here in Austin, one in New York, Munich, Amsterdam, and we're just really enjoying the journey of product design, bringing things to the market, whether it be consumer, industrial, or business related.
Amazing. So what are some of the projects you've worked on that the audience might go, oh yeah, I use that, or
oh yeah,
I know what that is.
Yeah, the hits are, well, if you reach way back, I helped design the interface of the Sandisk Sansafuse MP3 player, which they wanted to put a capacitive touch on it. We had to figure out how to make that relevant to users who only understood the dial of the iPod. And we ended up capturing the second largest position in the market, which wasn't that large because iPod had 80% of the market.
Yeah.
I worked on the Xbox One. I did a lot of with a group of people, helped with the voice and gesture interface there. And we created actually 3 or 4 full interaction models, of which stuff was sampled. Projects that big are always sampled from a lot of different designers. You can find 200 designers that would be able to say they designed the interface for the Xbox One. Most recently at Argo Design, we've done a lot of interesting work, but the most interesting would be the 3.5-year strategic design partnership I led with Argo Design and Magic Leap, working on their wearable mobile computing headset. And in that, we had to combine voice, gesture, computer vision, a whole new interaction metaphor. We worked on all parts of that product with their very capable internal teams everything from strategy to the OS design, input design. We even did a little industrial design on the controller, and really learned a lot about heads up and present computing.
Do you think great design is emergent, or do you feel like there's always one right answer for good designs for a given problem, or are there multiple truths?
Design is about finding one truth out of multiple available truths. If you were to ask my definition of product design, design in general is decision making. That's what it is. It's really a practice of decision making. Now, we tend to obsess over the decisions that have to do with form, function, how the features express and help or delight the user, the materials, but all of that is the practice of design, and really comes in three levels when you're doing it at a high level. One is arriving at the right answer. To answer your question again, there is no right answer. It's impossible to find, but you want to find the best answers you can. That's usually through user-centered design, like you go and talk to the user, or sometimes it has to be presumptive because the users won't have the answer, but you're looking for criteria that can come up with the rightest answer you can come to. But second, you have to present that answer in a way that people understand it. This is where the artifacts of design come from that most people are familiar and confused with the practice of design, which is decision making, right? The beautiful pictures, the comps, the future vision, the moving graphics, the things that ultimately add up to the interface that you are touching, tapping, or the buttons and the materials you are playing with. But the third part of really successful design at a high level is you have to also present that answer in the way that people are willing to accept it. So from a user perspective, that means it has low friction, that it's easy for them to learn or intuitive, that it gives them the value or the delight that they are looking for from the experience. But for the client, it means that it correctly positions their value, puts in the guardrails on their business model, helps them achieve the values and the delights they want for building their community or selling their product or creating a new capability, right? So that's my view on design. So no, there is no single right answer.
Yeah, I love that.
I remember, but you have to establish something that's right so other people can build it. Ideas are easy. The practice of design is taking those into a path that can be actionable.
Yeah. What's more important, speed or beauty?
Oh, it really depends on the situation. But clients are always going to ask for both.
Yeah.
But beauty doesn't always take time. Sometimes it does, but sometimes that time's encapsulated in experience, right? And so at Argo Design, we hire a lot of very experienced designers who have mastered their technique so greatly that they are like a coal train, right? That when the time to solo comes up, all they're thinking about is the emotional expression and the connection with the user because they've mastered their tool so fully. So that's one form of time. You always see the tropes on the internet of like, why is it $900,000 for this PowerPoint deck and it only takes you 2 weeks? And it's like, well, because it took me 25 years of my career to understand how to do this in 2 weeks. So
yeah, you're not paying for my time, you're paying for my knowledge. That's what the guy who repaired my fridge in exactly 75 minutes and charged me $500 to do. He goes, yeah. I was like, gosh, you're here for 75 minutes and it's $500. It was like it's $80 part or something like that. So call it $400 an hour. He goes, oh, you're not paying me for my time.
Yeah. And so you don't have to have the aggravation of learning how to do it as well. That's a very valid point. But sometimes, like when interfaces are less conventional and you're dealing with a convergence of like hardware interacting with software and people are not familiar with the expressions, it does take a certain amount of time to work through those details.
Yeah.
And most of the time when we're negotiating with a client at the top, first of all, we tell them, we think by making. Ideas are easy. We want to get to expressions as quickly as possible. But that's different from the speed of realizing a level of quality, beauty, or experience.
Yeah.
The more time you give me, the better I'll make it. Now, it does run into the rule of 80-20. There is diminishing returns on that time, and there is a point where you have to call it good enough and just deliver.
You've gotten as close to the absolute truth of the experience, and it's time to ship.
Yeah, and you're dancing about architecture. There is a point where it needs to get into the market and into users' hands before you can really refine it any further. And there's a lot of techniques for that as well. In the modern disruption era, if you will, people have done all kinds of fun things, like how Niantic put out Ingress and then Pokemon Go, right, to disguise the fact that they were trying to learn how to make augmented reality and physical activity a really fun experience.
Right. And at the core of every technological platform shift throughout history, user interfaces have been, center stage, right? You think of the computing revolution, and then the internet with the browser. You had mobile, right? And now, of course, everyone's talking about AI.
Yeah.
We all saw the Rabbit demo at CES. That was pretty remarkable. What are
Yeah.
your quick thoughts on the Rabbit demo? That you saw that one?
Oh, yes, I've seen that product, and it's not the first of its kind. It's just the most sophisticated and in the latest.
Yeah.
It's really fun. It'll be really interesting experiment to watch happen. But it's a very complicated user model, and I think the friction of not having a display will catch up with them, and eventually it's going to migrate to wearable mobile computing. But it's a great device for the day. It's not quite a BlackBerry in my estimation. It's more like some of the early feature phones we had where you could look at, you got a feed of sports stats via RSS, but you couldn't look at the front page of the sports property
It's
on
more
a
of like
web
a
page.
harbinger of what's to come. So let's dig into that. You have the reason you're on this podcast is I saw a YouTube interview about with you about AI and interfaces. I was like, wow, Jared has really interesting thoughts. Let's have him on the pod and just kind of dig into this stuff. So what are some of the ways that you see in AI impacting this kind of platform shift, this user interface, how we interact with computers
absolutely.
in the coming years? Yeah.
Let's start back with Rabbit, right? Which is this little pin you wear on your chest, has a forward-facing camera, it has a mic, right? Has ability to do a few tricks. But the only thing that makes it an acceptable computer interface is this idea of the age of comprehension. The latest large language models have brought us a sea change where we can communicate with human language to a computer, and it has an ability to comprehend that and return comprehensible statements, right? And we've all seen the first blush of that through largely lack of interface.
Yeah.
Which is the number one problem with this generative AI right now, is there's a complete lack of interface. Like there's only so many people that are going to learn the command architecture of Discord in order to pull things out of Mid-Journey, right? Just like there were only a limited number of humans that ever learned DOS in order to do computing.
Like driving a car with the boat rudder steering. When cars first came out, they didn't have a wheel, right? They had the boat rudder.
More like riding a horse, like driving a buggy. Like these are two completely different creatures that there's only certain people who get the empathic relationship needed to guide a horse correctly, right? And other people were simply riding in the carriage.
Yeah.
Right. That's your IT department in the 1950s and 60s and the rest of humanity, right? Once Windows established a metaphor which was the 60s office place, which instantly put people in a frame of mind where they could learn to put files into folders, and they had a language to talk about it so they could teach each other, did the adoption expand from the very small number of horse riders to those who could drive a Model T, right? The same thing here with AI. Rabbit exists because suddenly the computer is no longer pure voice command structure. It actually can infer your meaning from the statements. Now, that's not done directly. It's done through degrees of separations, but I have a good example for you. Okay, it's a demo that I saw that's close to my heart, because if you search me on YouTube, you're going to find a lot of videos of me turning on and off lights.
I love that.
All different ways, like pointing at them with voice and saying, turn on that light, turn off that light, using only gesture, all kind. It was something that I examined for years, right? but it was all command computing. We didn't really get natural language computing out of it, right? Which meant it was like Star Trek. You had to memorize all the commands, computer, T, Earl Grey, right? And if you didn't, you couldn't steer. Was the problem with home automation today. Unless you're willing to go back and set all these rules that say, if I say this phrase specifically, or this phrase specifically, or this phrase specifically, or it contains this word and this word, then do this action. It's a lot of rules setting up that no one will do.
Yeah.
Well, now you can actually take something like, the living room is depressing. You can put it into Chat GTP and with a prompt that adds, write me 4 paragraphs on how to make a living room less depressing, like less fill in the blank, depressing, right? And it'll give you a great essay.
Right.
And in that essay will be the line, sometimes it's helpful to turn on accent lights, right? Well, if I'm a home automation software, that's something I can key in on. Turn on accent lights is something I can do. And so if I just do that, it actually ends up making comprehensible sense to the user. You can come home and say, ugh, this room is so depressing. And then the accent lights turn on. You go like, oh, that's better. Before, that was a really hard thing to do, of setting up a bunch of rules. And that's what I mean by the age of comprehension and how you end up with these 2nd and 3rd degree features. So the fact that I can sit here and have a computer watch my world and come up with meaningful insights is a huge benefit, but that's a direct path to it. Eventually, we're going to get to better interfaces for that. And likely the interfaces are still software. We often say at Argo Design, when possible, answer as technology. This applies to multimodal computing. In other words, if I point at the light and say, turn on the light, and the computer comes back and says, okay, I am turning on the light for you now. Or worse, let's say you have a problem and it didn't see what light you pointed at, and it says, okay, which light would you like me to turn on? Light 1 or light 2? Like, we all are like just going crazy at this point. It's like having a roommate. You're like, when did I start paying $9 a month to Amazon to have a roommate? By the way, this will be the problem with full bipedal robots as well. But if the light just turns on and answers as technology, it's a really magical experience, right? So very quickly, I think we're going to be moving from these directory-based or these voice-based things to where you can invoke an experience and the interface is just presented for you magically. In increasing measures, the AI is going to be able to use that interface, and AI is going to be able to code up that interface. Also, AI is going to be able to infer a lot from your data stream about what you value and anticipate what you're looking for. This already exists. We all go to Amazon, and there's recommendations and a page made custom for us. When you converge these all together, that's what we call the real-time internet. So we're reaching a stage where, rather than going to an app store and looking for the features of a specific piece of software and then wading through the privacy requirements and giving away all our contacts and all that nightmare that they want to get from us, and some in-app purchasing garbage, just so that we could have a digital level, so we could level a painting, right? Instead, the operating system will have enough of a large language model trained on code conventions and UI conventions that I can just say, hey Siri, I need a level. And it's just going to code up an application that is a level, right? This is a very...
I think what you're describing is something I've been wrestling with as a venture capitalist that backs B2B SaaS companies. Are we de-SaaSifying everything? What is the future of SaaS?
We're going to reserve SaaS to where it's a useful model, right? Where there's a high value and a high complexity, and it's important for me to save my opportunity costs and times by paying another expert to execute for me. What's happened is that people are applying SaaS model to things like editing photos for Instagram, or SaaS models to things like making restaurant recommendations. These are not things that we should have to pay for in the world of software. They are incredibly easy to do and are almost free to execute. The only thing that makes them expensive is the App Store models and this idea that a human spent a lot of time writing this very simple code and would like to make a living off of that. And the truth is that that's not the best business model. It leads to data piracy, and it leads to ad-supported software, and it leads to gamification strategies that are frustrating the user. This is what Cory Doctorow, and being liberal with his application of it, but this is the term he calls enshittification, right? Where something that largely should be free, kind of like your neighbor saying, hey, what's the weather like in Austin right now on the phone? And you're like, hey, it's sunny and awesome, and it will be next week. Come over. That's free. I could say, well, why don't you Venmo me $1 and I'll tell you. That's what we're doing
to my
with
weather
software.
app and I'll tell you. Yeah.
Well, but the thing is that's crowded the App Store to the point where it's almost unusable. It's created all kinds of abuses in the name of extracting more dollars out of a platform than the users have to pay. And just like the WinZip era, where we paid $39 a month or a one-time fee to archive folders, eventually that just turned into a software fee in the operating system, and we didn't have to worry about it. So we're about to WinZip 30 to 60% of the App Store, where we just ask Siri for these experiences. Siri creates them, and then they just go away. So we don't have to establish accounts, all that. And the data that's necessary to do that will hopefully move into a data marketplace, which would be a great use of a lot of the Web3 technologies beyond selling, titles to art to each other in some sort of, possible pyramid scheme. This is what it looks like. Maybe it's not, but I could be wrong.
You're describing NFTs.
Yeah. Well, I'm really describing blockchain. Blockchain would be far more useful to create a data marketplace where we each could own our data and therefore transact it for value with it, rather than each individual company asking for us for a right to our entire privacy so that they can store all our data and monetize it for themselves. Right? That's got to end. And if it does, these features start lining up in a way where we have much better experiences, right? So if I spin up an app and it generates a little data on me, and when that app spins down, and it's all just part of my OS, fee from iOS, right?
Yeah.
That data goes back into my data marketplace to help every other experience be great. Now, a lot of software developers who are kind of like maybe in the ad-supported industry of data piracy could go on to work at real SaaS companies and solve real productivity, entertainment, and delight problems for users, rather than just, being those guys on the Vegas Strip who hand out cardboard flyers trying to get you to go to some buffet, right?
I love that.
I think it's better for everyone, this real-time internet, but it's also kind of what's happening because the large language models can do this. And that's a first, maybe that's a far vision, but it's not really a far vision.
Yeah.
And it's,
I think what you're describing is the long-term, Kevin Kelly wrote a book called What Technology Wants, which is an awesome read. I haven't read it in like a decade now, but he kind of talks about the inevitability of some technologies, right? And I think what you're describing is this creative destruction that happens when new paradigms come out. It kind of envelops or, kind of eats the prior generation of technology for breakfast.
Definitely. Yeah.
And then
but also when you compare it with a form factor like a wearable mobile computer, right? So now I'm looking through my computer, and the other half of my heads up and present life, where immersive screen-based computing is a heavy toll or even not safe.
Yeah.
I can still invoke and amplify from a very human perspective my world. And that, I think, is another interesting outcome of AI, is that it's going to create the wearable mobile computer, because some of the main problems and use cases we were facing there was, one, comprehension for the user model, right? We couldn't have the metaphor we wanted, which was, put that over there and have a digital object move, because it was taking so much processing power. That's now gone away. Yeah. Object identification, right? These models, even though we're mostly using them for generating stuff, they're getting really good at identifying stuff in a meaningful way, right? Yeah. You can put GPS, my coworker Theo did this. You can put GPS coordinates in the right prompt into ChatGPT, and ask it something like, using this as a starting point, create a good tour that would last about 2 hours, cover no more than 4 miles for someone who is a Harry Potter enthusiast. And it does at times it can do an amazing job of that, right?
Yeah.
Now pair that with these glasses, right? And the real-time internet, and you could be in any city and have a tour that fit your interests while you were heads up and present, walking around, getting little information feeds here or through audio. And then, of course, in the far distance future, there's whole AR overlay controversy, hyper real, whatever you will. Maybe it goes that route. Or maybe it just stays a little Cyrano Dvorak, like giving us advice in our ear, which Mark Ralston, he talks about that a lot, this idea that, for decades now they're becoming real. These AI personal advisors that are like a meta-me, like that can take your data, predict your desires or your needs and give it to you.
Well, it's like having a whole staff of PhDs that are experts not only in their field, but experts in you.
Yeah, and it's how probabilities work in computing, which is something we've worked in AI for a while. And we're also accustomed to procedural computing and closed loop algorithms, meaning I press this happens. I search, I look through the results, and this happened. This idea of anticipatory open loop probability-based computing lends itself to those kind of experiences where it's like, well, it has a likelihood of coming up with what your next word in the sentence would be, right?
Yeah. Do you think there'll always be a time and place for screens, or do screens completely go away and we just end up wearing glasses, or maybe contacts or some sort of retinal?
Screens do not go away. Now, screens may end up being subsumed into your glasses, but there's a difference between the two experiences.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
By nature of the hardware, computing has always been an immersive experience, meaning you look at the screen when it's flashing at 60 hertz and your peripheral vision closes off because you're now scanning biologically for a lion in the brush. On the other side of that screen is amazing power of asymmetry and a multitasking model that allows you to put together any workflow. And it's captured all the asymmetrical parts of our lives. And what do I mean by asymmetry? Okay, obvious example. I can take an entire skyscraper and I can fit it in this screen, and I can zoom in and look at an individual bolt. I can zoom out and get the gestalt of the whole skyscraper in a city skyline. That's asymmetry, and that's extremely powerful, because to do that in the real world requires helicopters and binoculars and all kinds of stuff, right? Same with accounting. So same with, entertainment. All these abstract areas of our life that have asymmetry to the real world are great on immersive screens and will remain great on immersive screens. Okay, we're not dolphins. We don't read in 3D. We're always going to want a page of a book to read, and we're going to want to immerse into that page of the book when we read. Same with movies and the rest. However, that has taken up now 50% of our waking life. It's taken up most of the parts of business that are abstract or asymmetrical, and it's even bleeding into times when one-to-one relationships or being heads up and present are more important. And when it does, it's usually not great, right? This is the classic reading a text message and tripping into a fountain moment, right? You did not need to be immersive in that moment, right? You needed to be one-to-one, right? So the wearable mobile computing and mixed reality, right, actually is far better at establishing a one-to-one relationship at moments when you want to be heads up and present, right? So if I am a housekeeper working in a hotel, I could have an app, and I could go in the app, establish my credentials, go to the section that's relevant to me, go to my day work plan, and go in to a specific room number, see if it's readiness to be clean, go out, go back into a specific room number, see its readiness to be clean, go out, go in, kind of take that and make a plan handwritten here, because looking at this is a pain in the butt because I got to clean with both hands, go find the room. Okay, if I took those same little web pages, and that's all they are in that app for each room, and I took them out and I just hung them next to the door on a room, I can stand back and I can take up my whole day's work just scanning the hallway. That's a removal of friction, because the one-to-one nature and what Mike Ralston would call placefulness implies the rest of the context that we as user interface designers have to hand you using tools like directory, progressive disclosure, all that rule of 7 stuff of don't give a user more than 7 options at a time, right? All of that is to establish context, because the computer is only smart, it is not intelligent, right? And it's smart enough to know what to do if you tell it what it is we need to do, establish the context, right? Well, placefulness can establish context on its own. And then this one-to-one nature is really amazing, right? It also leads to a new metaphor and language for computing. I can say the presentation is on my desk. And it can literally mean the presentation is on my desk, meaning you can look at my desk with a pair of magic glasses, and there it is in all its 3D new glory, right?
Yeah.
Or you could pull out your iPhone. Because when I said it was on my desk, you and all the listeners just naturally imagined my desk. Because we are geographic creatures. It's how we evolve. It's how our brains work. You imagined a room, you imagined a desk. We are creatures
on the hill
of
over
fiction.
there.
Yeah, we're creatures of fiction. You've never been to my office. You don't know that I actually have a desk, but you can imagine it, right? Well, I can use that. You can have an iPhone app that says Jared, his office, his desk, and there's a presentation. That was only 4 file folders deep. Whereas if I did that with Google Drive, I would have to invite you with a link, because describing you the path that I've come up with, which is ad hoc file and folder stuff that requires a Dewey Decimal System and a card catalog to negotiate, has gotten quite complex. And using geography as an organizing metaphor is far more intuitive and sticks in the memory better. I can just tell you, hey, that presentation's on my desk, and in shorthand, you can probably work out the file tree to get to it. Whereas on Google Drive, I'd have to explain the entire. So that's a reduction of friction. It's the same reduction of friction that Windows created over the directory structure we were talking about earlier.
Or Google search on the internet.
Right. And anytime you remove friction in
enormous
computing like
reduction of friction just to be able to find the best stuff.
Yeah, now you get adoption. And that's why we're all going to be wearing the heads-up displays, because it will amplify our life and it will create a new metaphor, but screens won't go away. Very often we'll be looking through our magic glasses at a device we carry around in our pocket that has more computing power, because we want the asymmetry and the immersion of that device. And by the way, VR sits right at the top of this clock, but it's actually more immersive computing. Pass-through makes it a little mixed reality, right? So most of the VR, and why VR has not just taken off in business and stuff, is because it's just cannibalizing from screens, and a lot of times screens are the better case. The green field is mixed reality.
So when we're not going to be walking around with Apple Vision Pros anytime soon.
No. How
many generations away are we to having, kind of immersive, widely applicable, everybody has a cell phone kind of AR, VR?
5 and 7 years. No, I don't know. I thought I'd be very specific, because no one ever is on these answers, right? And then they sound really, really smart. But no, that would be my estimate, is we're somewhere between 5 and 10 years. There's nothing in the laws of physics that prevent you having an iPhone on your face. For the next 10 years, I'd say we're probably going to have iWatches on our face, unless you're willing to be the early adopter influencer, or you're at Meow Wolf and you're paying for a 2-hour experience, or you're paid to wear the device all day. The form factor and the ergonomics are too much for general mixed reality heads-up and present computing. That form factor has been established a long time ago. I'm wearing glasses. It is glasses. Until you can bring it down to about under 100 grams, give it a 110-degree field of view, really enough slam at a rate that it doesn't make you sick. All that miniaturization, heat dissipation, the deployment of edge computing to make a thin client or better wireless attachments to this are necessary. But they're only steps. And I think about 5 to 10 years, we will finish those steps. You can already go on Amazon and buy a lot of like smart glasses displays. The whole waveguide thing has kind of been solved. But the metaphor for it, the use cases, and the backing architecture, right? We don't have an ICANN for objects yet.
What is that?
So imagine that a computer vision could identify unique features to the point that it realizes that's not just a type of object, it is a specific object in a specific location, right?
Mm.
That's a marker, that's a unique thing, right?
Yep.
An IP address is a unique thing, but there is this consortium called ICANN that resolves that unique thing to a URL and the other way around, which means we can traffic in URLs which point us to files, which are rendered based on their type in a previewer. The most famous version of that being a web browser and the internet. The next most famous one being most every app you run on your phone, right? Well, we need that for the physical world. We need some sort of consortium, not some owned garden, that can create spatial anchors, that there can be a table put on them like Google Files, right? So that I can set permission, visibility, and create an organizing structure, right? And then we can begin using the real world to resolve pointers, based on a trigger to whatever their file type asks for, right? Pop up the presentation in space, put a 3D object on the table, launch a gaming experience. All those things are just URLs. So we need that kind of transaction. That's the other thing that's really holding up augmented reality and mixed reality right now, is we don't have that way. Now, QR codes are a start. QR code is an example of this. Unfortunately, pulling out your camera, unlocking your phone, tapping on the link, going through all the garbage of enshittification after that, like signing up an account just to look at a restaurant menu.
You want me to log in to look at a menu? I just want to look at the menu.
Like, use the thing people hate, like what happened to hospitality, the thing people hate more than anything in the world is having to make up another password, and they're making it do it just to look at a freaking menu. That's an exact, should not exist. It should just be as simple as a unique anchor with a publicly available universal algorithm backed by an ICANN that resolves it to, a JPEG. Now the restaurant owner can just take a picture of their menu, put it there, and just like they do on their website with their URL, which no one will go to that anymore. It's too much friction to go, oh, you mean you have a website and have to put it in to see your menu? But the QR code, yeah. So that's what I mean by an ICANN for the physical space. Like, we need this kind of layers and a metaphor. We haven't established a metaphor yet. And, until we had iOS as a metaphor for handheld computing, its adoption was limited to like mostly salespeople who had Blackberries, right? And feature phones. So now those are things we're waiting for. And AI will help us get there, because AI, these large models and the current crop and even the traditional machine learning modules are going to be able to use computational power to solve these things, right? Before we know it, some company like Espinity, who makes analog chipsets which are super low power, will write an analog-based machine learning module that can identify unique features based on the algorithm of this ICANN. And for almost no battery life at all, you could be walking around and lazy loading on your phone is a table of anchors that are around you that are relevant to you, that you can invoke at any time. And so we really will be marking up the physical world in order to amplify our experience in moments when we are heads up and present.
That's really interesting.
I know it sounds dystopian to some people, but at least the computer is facing our way, and we can decide and that makes it more human. It becomes a more human form of computing. I can still make eye contact with you and then look over at your LinkedIn ID and then continue conversation. That's better than bringing your phone out and getting distracted on, I think.
I guess, so we're not at the iPhone moment yet. You would say this Apple Vision Pro is kind of like, I don't know, like the Apple IIe of computing. It's kind of like, we'll look back at it and it's like, that green screen was like, we have fond memories of it, but it was so rudimentary compared to where computers have gotten to with 4K resolution, RTX.
Yeah, it might be
NVIDIA.
like the shoulder-mounted VHS, cassette recorder with the hip-mounted recorder, right? That enthusiasts and influencers used and began to express the tools that used to take Hollywood to create, right?
Yeah.
And that led us all the way to the Blair Witch Project, and now like we have, you know, smartphones that can create that. So it's similar to that. It's a dev kit, and it's really my opinion, and this is just opinion, and it's my opinion, not Argo Design's opinion, is that this is a strategic release from Apple. And we're not familiar with that. It hasn't happened in a couple of epochs, right?
Right.
This is not a consumer product. Even though influencers and consumers are buying it, it's a consumer-friendly dev kit. It's designed to let developers solve the software equation of this, really establish the metaphor so that Apple can then come out with the iPhone for your face. It's also meant, like the famous movie quote, to sweep the leg, Johnny, right? I think it was meant to make Mark Zuckerberg's life hard and take, you know, because
Apple's not just going to stand by and let another computing paradigm come out without them leading the way or at least being involved.
Well, they used to sit back and go, like feed them rope and let them think they had a whole market like RIM, and then come out with a, you know, and even
Category.
Steve Ballmer thought he had a whole market with the Windows Phone, and then they came out with a better experience and killed everyone, right? But in this case, they've gone early. And I think it's just because, you know, they realized they wanted like Meow Wolf, who's been, you know, that's a company that,
maybe you can tell the audience what Meow Wolf is. I know what it is because I went in Denver, but yeah, what is that for the audience?
Yeah, it's like a trippy Disneyland, right? It's an artist.
Trippy Disneyland for adults.
Yeah, kids love it too. It's an artist installation space that you walk through and just have these amazing experiences. It's like Instagram, you know, had a baby with Salvador Dali or something.
Like walking into Alice in Wonderland on mushrooms in the
what
future.
It really, yeah, exactly. What it really is a theme park. Okay, it's a theme park. So Disney, the same story with Disney, right? Apple wanted Disney buying a bunch of headsets from, you know, was going to be users' first experience with these things, is experiential activations, right? And so they wanted that to be an Apple story, and they have the development. That's what my opinion is they captured that whole experiential market. They captured a lot of industrial and enterprise use cases because the development story is easier, and the budget of the device is not the problem there. Like the person wiring up, using these headsets to wire up like a GE aircraft engine correctly, right? When they do that correctly the first time, it saves GE an obscene amount of money.
Right.
Something like on the order of 40 or 50 grand. Like the $500
real business results through AI.
Yeah, the $500 to $3,500 price point is immaterial at that point. You just want the best thing, and the software costs and the integration are the most important part. So the current enterprise, you know, use cases kind of got swept up. The experiential use cases got swept up. They got the developer base now working off of holding up phones and on wearable mobile computing, and they have a bunch of influencers wearing it and walking around and introducing it to people.
I guess that would be a really cool podcast to do. I wonder if I should convert my podcast to Apple Vision Pro and just get ahead of the curve. Send around an Apple Vision Pro to people and be like, you wear this and I wear it, and now we're in like the metaverse doing the podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah,
right?
We could have this exact same experience on the...
Yeah, but it would be like you're sitting across the table from me, and it feels like we're in the same room, but we're really sitting there.
I've never done a podcast that way. So, I mean, I've never done a podcast in person like you see Joe Rogan and all those people do, where they have the guest in the studio.
Yeah.
So this is more familiar
Lex Friedman,
to me.
I think, is in Austin. You're in Austin, right?
Yeah, I'm in Austin.
He had Mark Zuckerberg on the Lex Friedman podcast, and they did it in the metaverse. So, I think they're wearing Quest Pros and talking to each other.
Listen, I've done a lot of spatial telepresence. In fact, we designed an entire spatial telepresence app with Magic Leap. Yeah.
What's going on with Magic Leap? You keep hearing about them. They've raised, I don't know, hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're still not quite out yet to market. Where are they?
First of all, I have to open any conversation with Magic Leap by saying we now know what an impressive feat they pulled off. Okay, with $2.5 billion, they created not one but two brand new computers. They had to write their own operating system, had to create their own factory to crush out the display. They did all the
Yeah.
industrial design, the software, the experiences, the platform, the ability to author apps. I mean, Zuckerberg was spending that much in a month. It's amazing on how, with so little
Oh yeah, they were
money, how
$2
much they
billion
have
a
done.
month building the metaverse is what
Yeah.
Meta was spending. Crazy.
Well, and Magic Leap took that and put out really the first new computing platform since iOS and Android. And in the history of computing, arguably, it's only the fourth platform that has come out. That's amazing, amazing when you think about it. But right now, I'll give you the most I can of the inside scoop version of this. Okay, Magic Leap was set up to do exactly the story I told you with Apple. You know, Meow Wolf was going to buy these. Disney was going to buy these. Experiential was going to expose it to the public, which is going to help build a user base so that the developers had someone to sell their apps to, right? And they put the whole app story together before users, and that's really hard to do because developers want eyeballs before they write code, right? And at the same time, the devices had a lot of business applications as well. They knew very much that this was not the everyday, all at once, all the time device. They knew that was a pair of glasses. This was a very sophisticated dev kit. But then the pandemic happened. And with lockdown, it swept away that whole experiential opportunity because we weren't getting together in person anymore. And spatial computing is about getting together in person, look through mixed reality, not virtual reality, right? And with that, you lost a lot of developer interest, and they had to pivot to enterprise scenarios where people are paid to wear the thing and where there's enough arbitrage to capture that, like medical or industrial, right? And that's where they sit today. And unfortunately, in that arena, you go back into skunkworks. These are long, solutions-oriented contracts that take multiple years. They're very large, and you don't get to talk about them or their success until they've been deployed publicly. But the fact that they're still taking investment means that they have good traction in this area. They can crush out 100,000 devices in a year once they've finished a generation of hardware design, which is very unique for a company position. So I think there's a chance they still make it on the enterprise use cases and the experiential use cases where you really need to be able to look through the device or pass through just for, even if it's really, really good pass through, is just not acceptable. So I know I would not count them out yet. And in a lot of ways, Vision Pro has opened up people's imagination and just educated the mass market on what spatial computing and wearable mobile computing is, that may help Magic Leap. I don't think Apple put this out to kill Magic Leap. I don't think they cared anything about Magic Leap other than hiring a whole bunch of their designers, which they did. And
Nice.
it's one of the reasons. Argo Design and them, we helped write the first design guide on spatial computing. You can go find it at Magic Leap's website. I encourage you to read it and then go read the Apple design guide. This has always happened in computing. We're not jealous or anything like that. It's actually really nice to see that there has been resonance here from the quantum subconsciousness and some of the same people involved.
Is there a quantum subconsciousness?
I believe there is.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I do transcendental meditation, so I taste the rainbow on a daily basis. It's amazing.
That's awesome. I do a lot of meditation myself, but I also love to apply a pop physics to it as well. And I always tell people, you wind down to the lower levels of the universe, that predicted by superstring theory, there's another 10 or 11 dimensions which are closer together by the tightening of the universal spiral where the superstrings resonate, right?
Yeah.
So if you have an idea, there's about 10 other people having that idea at the same moment.
Yeah, it's almost like the universe is manifesting reality in a very certain way. Right?
Yeah.
It's kind of unfolding all at the right time,
Yeah. And that's one of my explanations or definitions of the quantum subconsciousness. So like, if you think it's a good idea, well, you should act on it because someone else probably will. But if you don't want to act on it, we'll still have the idea and declare it good because someone might act on it and make it real.
I love that. So last question, and I could talk to you for 2 more hours, obviously. I'm a B2B SaaS investor. How do you see AI and these new interfaces, this paradigm shift impacting B2B SaaS software in the next, call it five years?
Oh, it's going to be massive, and I think you're going to see it in a few phases. And the initial phase right now is going to feel like a bit of a disappointing one, meaning that it's going to enable them to pull a lot of costs out. And that's the first move they're going to make, is they're going to look for all the places they can pull costs out. And we've all seen the layoffs happening.
All the layoffs happening right now,
of that, right?
Yep.
Second, with that is going to come a certain amount of embarrassing irresponsibility from a design sense. Meaning that when we've been deploying traditional AI, and there is now a traditional AI over the last 10 years, it had to come with 4 other layers than the algorithms. You needed transparency to understand what the data transformations were doing. You needed provenance to understand what transformations had happened. You needed governance and performance, right? And you needed like ethical standards and review. These are open loop algorithms. It's really easy to lose control and lose money in business or do something that's not ethical. The large models were not architected with that in mind. Right. And they're being deployed more like an operating system in a cloud, meaning you write an app to run on our platform. And so,
well, it's almost like managing a person, right? Like the way that I communicate with the AI is very much how I communicate with an employee. Like you sometimes have to be very directive and be like, think it
with
through.
A person, if they mess up, like if a bridge collapses, we can go back and look at their work on their desk, and we can see you slipped a decimal point here. And if you're a licensed, civil engineer, you now go to jail for making that mistake. In the large language models, we cannot do. That's an example of provenance and transparency.
Yeah.
But the AI workers, the way they're architected currently, they don't have any of that. I can go to ChatGPT and ask, hey, how did it arrive at this conclusion that we relied on for this business decision? And then they'll tell you, we don't know, and we told you not to do that.
We told you not to follow this advice.
So right now, if you're going to deploy it, you need to, as much as people are looking at cost savings only, you actually need to spend also to build your own bespoke versions of transparency, provenance, governance, and performance, right? And people will catch up to that quickly. That'll be the first phase. The next phase, though, is in the background, there's a bunch of SaaSes popping up that have understood the second, third, and fourth order benefits rather than the direct benefits of what these models generate and put out, right? Yeah. Like the light bulb example that I told earlier, right? Someone's not looking at the output. They're saying, oh, this output allows me to fix home automation, right? So there's going to be a second wave where those SaaS players come in, and who knows whether someone comes up with a better CRM metaphor and methodology or whatever, and it may just destroy a lot of existing SaaSes, right? So that's the second thing to watch out. Then it'll all kind of normalize, and what we're going to get, someone is going to finally figure out that they should be a SaaS that just does a data marketplace, or regulation will force it on people, and we'll be entering that next wave of the internet and computationally augmented living, this real-time internet. And I think SaaS will be a huge model there because it's the right business model for creating the correct remuneration cycle. It's going to be very hard with these products and features that are created are endless, right? So it does kind of demand a subscription model over, an endpoint fee.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. Jared, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was one of my favorite episodes. I could have talked to you for 2 more hours. We'll have to have you back on the podcast at some point in the future. Thanks so much for coming.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you. And thank you to everyone listening.
Thank you.